Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more The Diary of Anne Frank. So yeah, she was still having trouble connecting to her mother in the last episode, but we're going to see if anything at all changes for her. Because we're waning down into the final days. Though Italy is no longer a threat, Germany still is, so let's hop into this. Saturday, February the 12th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, the sun is shining, the sky is deep blue, there's a magnificent breeze, and I'm longing, really longing, for everything. Conversation, freedom, friends, being alone. I long to cry. I feel as if I were about to explode. I know crying would help, but I can't cry. I'm restless. I walk from the one room to another, breathe through the crack in the window frame, feel my heart beating as if to say, fulfill my longing at last. I think spring is inside me. I feel spring awakening. I feel it in my entire body and soul. I have to force myself to act normally. I'm in a state of utter confusion. Don't know what to read, what to write, what to do. I only know what I'm longing that I'm longing for something. Yours, Anne. Monday, February the 14th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, a lot has changed for me since Saturday. What's happened is this. I was longing for something and still am, but a small, very small part of the problem has been resolved. On Sunday morning, I noticed to my great joy, I'll be honest with you, that Peter kept looking at me. Not in the usual way. I don't know. I can't explain it, but I suddenly had the feeling he wasn't as in love with Margot as I used to think. All day long I tried not to look at him too much because whenever I did, I caught him looking at me, and then, well, it made me feel wonderful inside, and that's not a feeling I should have too often. Sunday evening, everyone except Pim and me was clustered around the radio listening to the immortal music of the German masters. Dussel kept twisting and turning the knobs, which annoyed Peter and the others too. After restraining himself for half an hour, Peter asked somewhat irritably if he would stop fiddling with the radio. Dussel replied in his haughtiest tone, Ich mag das schon. Peter got angry and made an insolent remark. Mr. Van Daan sided with him, and Dussel had to back down. That was it. The reason for the disagreement wasn't particularly interesting in and of itself, but Peter has apparently taken the matter very much to heart, because this morning when I was rummaging around the crate of books in the attic, Peter came up and began telling me what had happened. I didn't know anything about it, but Peter soon realized he'd found an attentive listener and started warming up to his subject. Well, it's like this, he said. I don't usually talk much. Since I know beforehand I'll just be tongue-tied, I start stuttering and blushing, and I twist my words around so much I finally have to stop because I can't find the right words. That's what happened yesterday. I meant to say something entirely different, but once I started, I got all mixed up. It's awful. I used to have a bad habit, and sometimes I wish I still did. Whenever I was mad at someone, I'd beat them up instead of arguing with them. I know this method won't get me anywhere, and that's why I admire you. You're never at a loss for words. You say exactly what you want to say and aren't in the least bit shy. Oh, you're wrong about that, I replied. Most of what I say comes out very differently from the way I planned. Plus, I talk too much and too long, and that's just as bad. Maybe. But you have the advantage that no one can see you're embarrassed. You don't blush or go to pieces. I couldn't help being secretly amused at his words. However, since I wanted him to go on talking quietly about himself, I hid my laughter, sat down on a cushion on the floor, wrapped my arms around my knees, and gazed at him intently. I'm glad there's someone else in this house who flies into the same rages I do. Peter seemed relieved that he could criticize Dussel without being afraid I'd tell. As for me, I was pleased too, because I sensed a strong feeling of fellowship, which I only remember having had with my girlfriends. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, February the 15th, 1944. The minor run-in with Dussel had several repercussions for which he had only himself to blame. Monday evening, Dussel came to see Mother and told her triumphantly that Peter had asked him that morning if he'd slept well, and then added how sorry he was about what had happened Sunday evening. He hadn't really meant what he'd said. Dussel assured him he hadn't taken it to heart, so everything was right as rain again. Mother passed this story on to me, and I was secretly amazed that Peter, who'd been so angry at Dussel, had humbled himself despite all the assurances to the contrary. I couldn't refrain from sounding Peter out on the subject, and he instantly replied that Dussel had been lying. You should have seen Peter's face. I wish I had a camera. Indignation, rage, indecision, agitation, and much more crossed his face in rapid succession. That evening, Mr. Valentine and Peter really towed Dussel off, but I couldn't have been all. But it couldn't have been all that, since Peter had another dental appointment today. Actually, they never wanted to speak to each other again. Wednesday, February the 16th, 1944. Peter and I hadn't talked to each other all day except for a few meaningless words. It was too cold to go up to the attic, and anyway, it was Margot's birthday. At 12:30, he came to look at the presents and hung around chatting longer than was strictly necessary, something he'd never have done otherwise. But I got my chance in the afternoon. Since I felt like spoiling Margot on her birthday, I went to get the coffee, and after that, the potatoes. When I came to Peter's room, he immediately took his papers off the stairs, and I asked if I should close the trap door to the attic. Sure, he said. Go ahead. When you're ready to come back down, just knock and I'll open it for you. I thanked him. He went upstairs and spent the last 10 minutes searching around in the barrel for the smallest potatoes. My back started aching and the attic was cold. Naturally, I didn't bother to knock, but opened the trap door myself, and he obligingly got up and took the pan out of my hands. I did my best, but I couldn't find any smaller ones. Did you look in the big barrel? Yes, I've been through them all, By the time I was at the bottom of the stairs and he examined the pan of potatoes he was still holding. "Oh, but these are fine," he said, and added, as I took the pan from him, "My compliments." As he and as he said this, he gave me such a warm, tender look that I started glowing inside. I couldn't tell he wanted to please me, but since he couldn't make a long complimentary speech, he'd said everything with his eyes. I understood him so well that and was very grateful. It still makes me happy to think back to those words and that look. When I went downstairs, Mother said she needed more potatoes this time for dinner, so I volunteered to go back up. When I entered Peter's room, I apologized for disturbing him again, and as I was going up the stairs, he stood up, went over to the stand between the stairs and the wall, grabbed my arm, and tried to stop me. "I'll go," he said. "I have to go upstairs anyway." I replied that it wasn't really necessary, that I didn't have to get only the small ones this time. Convinced, he let go of my arm. On my way back, he opened the trapdoor and once again took the pan from me. Standing by the door, I asked, "What are you working on?" "French," he replied. I asked if I could look at his lessons. Then I went to wash my hands and sat down across from him on the divan. After I'd explained some French to him, he began to talk. He told me that after the war he wanted to go to the Dutch East Indies and live on the rubber plantation. He talked about his life at home in the black market and how he felt like a worthless bum. I told him that he had a big inferiority complex. He talked about the war, saying that Russia and England were bound to go to war against each other, and about the Jews. He said life would have been much easier if he'd been a Christian, or could have become one after the war. I asked if he wanted to be baptized, but he wasn't. But that wasn't what he meant either. He said he'd never be able to feel like a Christian, but that after the war he'd make sure nobody would know he was Jewish. I felt a momentary pang. It's such a shame he still has a touch of dishonesty in him. Peter added, "The Jews have been and always will be the chosen people." I answered, "Just this once, I hope they'll be chosen for something good." But we went on chatting very pleasantly about Father, about judging human character and all sorts of things. So many that I can't even remember them all. I left at 5:15 because Bep had arrived. That evening, he said something else I thought was very nice. We were talking about the picture of a movie star I'd once given him, which he has been hanging in his room for at least a year and a half. He liked it so much that I offered to give him a few more. "No," he replied, "I'd rather keep the one I got. I look at it every day, and the people in it have become my friends. I now have a better understanding of why he always hugs Moshi so tightly. He obviously needs affection too. I forgot to mention something else he was talking about. He said, 'No, I'm not afraid except when it comes to things about myself, but I'm working on that.' Peter has a huge inferiority complex. For example, he always thinks he's so stupid and we're so smart. When I help him with the French, he thanks me 1,000 times. One of these days I'm going to say, 'Oh, cut it out. You're much better at English and geography.' And Frank." Thursday, February the 17th, 1944. Dear Kitty, I was upstairs this morning since I promised Mrs. Valentine I'd read her some of my stories. I began with Eva's Dream, which she liked a lot, and then I read a few passages from The Secret Annex, which had her in stitches. Peter also listened for a while, just the last part, and asked if I'd come to his room sometime to read more. I decided I had to take a chance right then and there, so I got my notebook and let him read that bit where Katie and Hans talk about God. I can't really tell what kind of impression it made on him. He said something I don't quite remember, not about whether it was good, but about the idea behind it. I told him I just wanted him to see that I didn't write only amusing things. He added, he nodded and I left the room. We'll see if I hear anything more. Yours, Anne Frank. Friday, February the 18th, 1944. My dearest Kitty, whenever I go upstairs, it's always so I can see him. Now that I have something to look forward to, my life has improved greatly. At least the object of my friendship is always here, and I don't have to be afraid of rivals except for Margot. Don't think I'm in love, because I'm not. But I do have the feeling that something beautiful is going to develop between Peter and me, a kind of friendship and a feeling of trust. I go see him whenever I get the chance, and it's not the way it used to be when he didn't know what to make of me. On the contrary, he's still talking away as I'm heading out the door. Mother doesn't like me going upstairs. She always says I'm bothering Peter and that I should leave him alone. Honestly, can't she credit me with some intuition? She always looks at me so oddly when I go to Peter's room. When I come down again, she asks me where I've been. It's terrible, but I'm beginning to hate her. Yours, Anne M. Frank. We'll go ahead and end that part there. So yeah. So while what little of a relationship she has with her mother has been deteriorating, she and Peter are growing closer into great friends. And yeah, she sometimes sees Margot as a rival for Peter's affections, but I don't think she sees him as a love interest, but as a real close friend. So yeah, lemon drop. But yeah, she sees Peter as a close friend. Their relationship is getting tighter. And they're just openly talking about one another. With each other. About things with each other. And yeah. It gives her someone really to talk to besides her diary, where she's been missing her friends for so long. She hasn't had them to talk to spend time with. And now she has someone she can kind of get along with. Kind of really talk to about things. So it's that kind of human interaction a lot of people need. Because you think about the pandemic, some people couldn't stand being inside. They wanted people to talk to be around. I'm not that way. I'm not a big people person. I could be just fine on my own. I don't really need people to talk to. Which is why I sometimes might come off a little gruff to some people, but yeah. Um, Peter and Anne getting closer, becoming friends. And notice that it was right around Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Yeah. So, it was pretty interesting. But we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.